You might have come across this painting before, depicting a beautiful young man reclined in a squalid room with a chest of torn papers. You might even have heard the name Thomas Chatterton. But what you might not realize is that this painting captures a moment that had an enormous impact on English poetry and helped to bring about the birth of the English Romantic movement. This painting is titled The Death of Chatterton and was painted in 1856 by Henry Wallace. It's an artistic impression of a real event, the death, by his own hand, of a 17-year-old poet named Thomas Chatterton. This young man and his controversial life and death had fascinated English literary culture for over 70 years. Chatterton was born on the 20th of November 1752 in Bristol. His father died before he was born and he was raised in poverty, but despite this he was something of a child prodigy, being extremely studious and having a voracious appetite for reading. By the age of 11 he was able to write mature works of poetry, showing capabilities far beyond his years. His childhood was one of loneliness. It has been proposed that the lack of a father figure in his life fueled his need to shut himself off in a world of his own creation. Often locking himself in his attic room for hours on end, he conjured up worlds of 15th century heroes and heroines inspired by his reading. His sister recounts that as a child, when he was asked what he would like painted on a bowl for him, he responded, "Paint me an angel with wings and a trumpet to trumpet my name over the world." As a young man, he would continue to pursue his passion of 15th century heroes, inventing the character of Thomas Rowley, a supposed 15th century monk, and composing romances with him as the lead. His poems, however, were written as forgeries, claiming to be by the hand of a 15th century poet and not Chatterton himself. This fooled many literary experts for decades after his death, but also warned possible patrons away. This would prove to be Chatterton's biggest mistake. By 1770, Chatterton was becoming desperate. Living in a tiny London attic room, he was struggling to make a name for himself, trying to keep himself afloat by writing anything from political articles to operas, but was paid almost nothing despite his talent. The 17-year-old was now starving, going days without food and still unable to get recognition for the one thing he cared about, his 15th century writings. On the 24th of August 1770, he went up to his attic room for the last time, carrying arsenic with him, and destroyed all his remaining poetry. A few days after his death, Dr. Thomas Fry came to the house in search of Chatterton, wishing to offer him financial support. This would have been an answer to all Chatterton's prayers, but unfortunately he didn't live to see it. Dr. Fry managed to save some fragments of Chatterton's ripped-up work and pieced them together. These torn-up fragments survive to this day and are housed in Bristol University. His spurned genius, his loyalty to his imagination, as well as his tragic life and death, would captivate later Romantic writers who saw him as something of a romantic hero. Keats, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley and Dante Gabriel Rossetti all wrote works dedicated to his memory. To them, Chatterton reinforced everything English Romanticism stood for, the passionate and inspired genius standing on his own against an unfeeling and undeserving world. I'll end with two sonnets on Chatterton, one by John Keats, who unbeknownst to him at the time would have a similar fate, and one by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, so you can see for yourself how he was thought of. Sonnet to Chatterton by John Keats. O Chatterton, how very sad thy fate! Dear child of sorrow, son of misery, how soon the film of death obscured that eye, whence genius mildly flashed and high debate. How soon that voice, majestic and elate, melted in dying numbers. Oh, how nigh was night to thy fair morning! Thou didst die, a half-blown floweret which cold blasts amate. But this is past. Thou art among the stars of highest heaven, to the rolling spheres thou sweetly singest, naught thy hymning mars, above the ingrate world and human fears. On earth the good man base detraction bars from thy fair name, and waters it with tears. Thomas Chatterton by Dante Gabriel Rossetti. With Shakespeare's manhood at a boy's wild heart, through Hamlet's doubt to Shakespeare near allied, and kin to Milton through his Satan's pride, at death's sole door he stooped and craved a dart, and to the dear new bower of England's art, even to that shrine time else had deified, the unuttered heart that soared against his side drove the fell point and smote life's seals apart. Thy nested home, love's, noble Chatterton, the angel-trodden stair thy soul could trace, up Redcliff's spire and in the world's armed space, thy gallant sword-play, these to many and one, as sweet forever as thy grave unknown, and love, dream of thine unrecorded fate.